used to discriminate against women. Thousands of honour crimes committed every year, and hundreds of British citizens who've travelled to fight in Syria and Iraq. Recorded hate crime has risen every year since records were first collected in 2008. According to the Community Security Trust, the number of anti-Semitic attacks in Britain has more than doubled in the last year, and at 1,168, it now stands at the highest on record. According to Tell Mama, a charity that records anti-Muslim attacks in Britain, there are hundreds of incidents every year, including arson attacks on mosques and threats against worshippers. It's clear from these examples that extremism can take many forms. It can be ideological, or it can be driven by social and cultural norms that are contrary to British values and quite simply unacceptable. We've been clear all along that the government's counter-extremism strategy must seek to defeat extremism in all its forms. But it's obvious from the evidence that the most serious and widespread form of extremism we need to confront is Islamist extremism. Islamist extremists believe in a clash of civilizations. They promote a fundamental incompatibility between Islamic and Western values, an inevitable divide between them and us. They demand a caliphate or a new Islamic state governed by a harsh interpretation of Sharia law. They utterly reject British and Western values, including democracy, the rule of law, and equality between citizens, regardless of their gender, ethnicity, religion, or sexuality. They believe that it's impossible to be a good Muslim and a good British citizen, and they dismiss anybody who disagrees with them, including other Muslims, as kafirs or non-believers. We must always take care to distinguish between Islam, a major world religion followed peacefully by the overwhelming majority of 1 billion Muslims worldwide, and Islamist extremism. Islam is entirely compatible with British values and our national way of life, while Islamist extremism is not, and we must be uncompromising in our response to it. Because extremism is not something that can just be ignored. It cannot be wished away. It must be tackled head-on. Because where extremism takes root, the consequences are clear. Women's rights are eroded. There is discrimination on the basis of race and sexuality. There is no longer access to the labour market, to the law, or to wider society. Communities become segregated and cut off from one another. Intolerance, hatred, and bigotry become normalised. Trust is replaced by fear, reciprocity by envy, and solidarity by division. But tackling extremism is also important because of its link to terrorism. Not all extremism leads to violence, and not all extremists are violent, but there is without doubt a thread that binds the kind of extremism that promotes hatred and a sense of superiority over others to the actions of those who want to impose their beliefs on us through violence. Now, I know there are some people who disagree with me. They say what I describe as Islamist extremism is simply social conservatism. But if anybody else discriminated against women, denounced people on the basis of their religious beliefs, rejected the democratic process, attacked people on the basis of their sexuality, or gave a nod and a wink in favour of violence and terrorism, we wouldn't hesitate to challenge them, or if the law was broken, call for their prosecution and punishment. Some say we're picking on religion or religious beliefs, but to them I say, as a practicing Anglican myself, we're doing no such thing. Islamist extremists may say they are acting in the name of Islam, but there is no legitimate basis for extremism in Islam or in any major religion. The Quran says, do not go to extremes in your religion, and let there be no compulsion in religion. Leviticus tells Jews and Christians to love your neighbour as yourself. Sikhs believe that no one is my enemy, no one is a foreigner, with all I am at peace. While the Hindu Shanti mantra seeks peace for all, saying may all beings experience prosperity, may none in the world suffer. There are others who say we're picking on Islamist extremism when there are other forms of extremism we need to tackle. But that is untrue too. We want to defeat all forms of extremism, ideological or not, and where it is driven by ideology, we draw no distinction between a neo-Nazi and an Islamist extremist. The murder of Mohammed Salim in Birmingham in 2013 was driven by neo-Nazi ideology, just the same as the murderers of Lee Rigby were driven by Islamist extremist ideology. Some say we cannot base a counter-extremism strategy on British values because it is too difficult to define them. But we're not calling for a flag to be flown from every building or demanding that everyone drinks Yorkshire tea and watches Coronation Street. Our definition of extremism is the vocal or active opposition to fundamental British values, including democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, and the mutual respect and tolerance of different faiths and beliefs. And we regard calls for the death of members of our armed forces as extremist behaviour. This is a limited, practical and inclusive